Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's educational webinar with Cancer Support Community Los Angeles. I am Kathy Riley, the Associate Director of Programs at CSCLA, and I'm really honored to welcome you to this week's webinar that's titled Caring for Someone with Cancer, Caregivers and Compassion Fatigue. And before we begin, if this is your first time joining us, Cancer Support Community Los Angeles is a premier nonprofit organization providing vital social and emotional support to families facing cancer. And that includes patients and caregivers and their loved ones, all at no cost. Our programs include support groups, healthy lifestyle classes, social activities, and educational programs like this one. If you would like to learn more about our services and programs or watch past webinars, you can visit our website at cancersupportla.org. And before I introduce our speaker for today, note that your video and microphone are automatically disabled for this webinar, but we really encourage you to enter your questions into the Q&A feature that's found at the bottom of the Zoom window at any time. Our presenter will answer questions at the end of her presentation, and we may not be able to get to all of your questions today, but we'll certainly try to get to as many as possible. So I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker. Meg Cipolla holds a master's degree in Thanatology from Marian University and is a certified grief counselor with the American Institute of Healthcare Professionals. And inspired by the unexpected death of her mother in 2016, Meg has dedicated herself to supporting others facing serious illness and bereavement. And over the past 8 years, she has facilitated grief groups and counseled grieving individuals both in person and online. Meg approaches her work with empathy and openness. And for more information about her grief support services, you can visit her website at grievingtogether.net. And it really gives me the greatest pleasure to introduce you today, Meg. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with our community.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here and share. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just jump right in. So as Kathy mentioned, we're going to be talking today about caregiving for someone with cancer and compassion fatigue, what that means, what to be on the lookout for, how to combat it. And as Kathy said, I am a certified grief counselor. I have my master's in Thanatology. I'm the owner of Grieving Together, which is a grief support community here where I live in Thousand Oaks in Ventura County, where I facilitate grief groups and I do individual coaching with grief. And this really all started in 2015 when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. I'm an only child. My parents are no longer together, so it really came on me to be her primary caregiver in my mid-30s. And so that was a huge shift in our dynamic and what I had any experience with. Her cancer was very aggressive and she passed in June of 2016. And it really changed the trajectory of my life for many reasons. But I really immersed myself in the grief community and I went to my own grief support group. And when I finished that, I became a volunteer group leader, and then I got my master's in Thanatology. And I just realized that this is my calling, is really to sort of just walk beside others who are dealing with a terminal illness, dealing with the terminal illness of a loved one, and the grief that comes from their passing. And so I wanted to say this and sort of start at the top with this because I'm speaking to you today as someone who has lived experience as a caregiver. I want you to know that I understand what it takes to care for someone that you love and treasure who is terminally ill, and the toll that that can take and the love that it takes. I just really wanted to sort of frame our time together today with that, so that you also understand from a firsthand experience how important it is to take care of yourself while you're caring for someone else. And so my hope is that you'll leave our time together today with just a better understanding of your role as a caregiver, what compassion fatigue is, how to recognize the signs in yourself, and when it's time to maybe take a break and care for yourself, as well as, finding those moments for self-care while you're still caring for someone else. And so, little roadmap here, just to keep us on track. We're going to understand the role of a caregiver, what exactly it is that you do. It's pretty impressive when you sort of stop to think about all of the hats that you wear. Define what compassion fatigue is and how to recognize the symptoms that you might be headed in that direction. How compassion fatigue impacts you and your loved one and the people around you. And then just some strategies to manage and prevent compassion fatigue, manage the stress of the role, and how to prevent compassion fatigue. So before we get started, I just really invite you to take a minute and think about what you brought in with you today for our hour together. Are you a caregiver? Are you a patient? Are you someone who has cancer and are being cared for and not just are empathetic to your loved one and what they're going through? Are you a professional healthcare provider, maybe? Just kind of thinking about what you're bringing into this and what questions and thoughts you have as we go through. So who are caregivers? The definition of a caregiver is a person who tends to the needs and concerns of a person with short or long-term limitations due to illness, injury, or disability. And I think traditionally we think of caregivers as those in the medical profession, professional caregivers, doctors, nurses, social workers, home health aides, home nurses, skilled nursing facility assistants and aides. Those who really assist in identifying, preventing, or treating the illness. There are also volunteers at facilities. I volunteered at hospice for a long time, and so I would provide respite care for some of the nurses or the family members who couldn't come. So I was caregiving in those moments so that others could take a break and the person wouldn't be alone. But really, there's also familial caregivers. This includes family, friends, guardians of just individuals who really step in and care for a loved one who's been diagnosed with cancer at home. And I thought this statistic was really important to share also at the beginning. Caregivers, particularly familial caregivers, play an indispensable role in society. In 2021, 48 million family caregivers just in the US provided approximately 40 billion hours of care. 40 billion hours of care. The estimated economic value of their unpaid contributions amounted to about $600 billion worth of care. We don't have enough doctors, nurses, social workers, volunteers to cover 40 billion hours of care. So this is crucial, vital work that you are doing for your loved one. It's absolutely important and necessary. We couldn't do it without people stepping in. So just to highlight some of the roles and responsibilities, as a family caregiver, you wear a lot of hats. So I just listed a few here. starting with handling doctor's appointments, you're scheduling doctor's appointments, you're confirming doctor's appointments, you're canceling doctor's appointments, you're rescheduling doctor's appointments, you're making sure they don't conflict with other appointments, perhaps. You're providing that at-home care. Maybe that means, managing and administering medications, prescriptions, picking up those prescriptions from the pharmacy, getting information from the pharmacist, making sure, this new medication isn't going to interact badly with another medication that you're taking or your loved one is taking. Wound care. Maybe you have to change ports. Maybe you have to change bandages and apply, ointments and things like that. Down to basic general hygiene. Maybe you're assisting with using the restroom or taking a shower or bathing, getting dressed, house cleaning. On top of that, you still have to also add in, we've got to do laundry. We've got to make sure that the dishes are being done every day, that, plants are getting watered and bathrooms are getting cleaned, and as well as more intense work. Like if the air conditioning goes out, it's 90 degrees here where I live right now in Thousand Oaks. So I can't, that if I was caring for my mom in 90-degree weather and the air conditioning goes out, now that's one more thing that I have to call and coordinate. But that's on your plate. That's something that, that's one of your responsibilities. The transportation, add a chauffeur to your list. So not only are you scheduling those appointments and running to get those prescriptions, but maybe you're now chauffeuring to those appointments. You're driving to other social interactions. Graduations happened a few months ago, so there's family events, maybe there's reunions that you're trying to get to still maintain that connection with your social network. At church, maybe you go to your faith, maybe you're still working, maybe your loved one is still working, maybe they're in school, cooking and feeding. So you're providing meals. That's a regular duty that you have to do at home, including buying all the groceries, finding the recipes, cooking the recipes, meal prepping, maybe helping, potentially having to feed your loved one because they aren't able to, use their hands and arms that way anymore. So you're assisting with that as well. Plus, they need to be nutritious meals. Maybe the doctor has given you and your loved one a specific dietary care plan that you need to follow. So finding recipes that follow that and making sure that they're getting the right nutrients. And also water intake is just as important. Making sure that your loved one's getting enough fluids, because dehydration can lead to severe issues that you don't want to ever have to deal with. So you're just monitoring all of those things as well. Helping with exercise, maybe you're making sure that your loved one's getting the proper physical activity that's on your loved one's care plan to their ability. Maybe that means getting them out for a walk every day, even if it's just a block and back. Or maybe there's physical therapy exercises that you need to be doing in between doctor appointments to keep mobility going. Or it might be even as much as maybe assisting with movement. Maybe your loved one isn't able to get up out of their chair, and so you're having to lift and help them with that, or walking to bed or getting to the shower. Organizing the calendar. I mentioned those social activities earlier. So you're in charge of coordinating your loved one's schedule. It's an important part of caregiving because you and your loved one want to feel as normal as possible in this very difficult time. You just want to feel normal. And so you want to make sure that they're getting to those appointments, not just doctor's appointments, but like appointments with family, those scheduled events with family and friends, social events, retirement parties, or the church picnic, or end of summer parties could be happening. You have to coordinate all of that as well. Maybe, like I mentioned earlier, your loved one is still in school. And so you're trying to work all of that around so they can still get to their classes, or they're still working and you're coordinating getting them to their job. Maybe you have children in the equation, which adds a whole other layer that you're having to coordinate their activities. School is starting up again soon if it hasn't already, which means all of those extracurriculars, soccer, baseball, dance, bands, all of those are starting up again. And so you have to coordinate that schedule too. Running those errands, those day-to-day errands, even when your loved one is sick, that stuff still needs to get done. And so running to the post office to get stamps, or getting an oil change in your car, going to the DMV because your registration is due and you have to renew it, and just all of those every day-to-day things that you sort of take for granted. And then finally, the financial assistance that comes with that. A lot of times caregivers frequently become the person who manages the finances for their loved one, paying their bills, making sure their taxes are getting paid, making sure medical bills are getting paid. And a lot of times what ends up happening is maybe the caregiver has to dip into their own pockets to assist financially, which can also become, it can be a burden. Not that we wouldn't do it, but it still takes a toll. And so, and all of those are in addition to your own personal responsibilities. Maybe you're still working. Maybe you're still at, going to school. Maybe you're married. Maybe you have children. So it's trying to really juggle all of these responsibilities that you have for your loved one and for you. And so I wanted to sort of, maybe I don't want to belabor the point, but I just wanted to make sure that you really understood how much caregiving takes up. So we can face all of that brings challenges. There are different kinds of challenges that are faced by a caregiver, starting with physical demands and the fatigue. So if you're caring for someone who has difficulty with mobility, like I mentioned earlier, you're lifting them from beds to chairs, or beds to wheelchairs, or assisting them standing up and walking, which can strain your own back, can strain your own arms, your own legs if you're not, doing it properly, or, it can be awkward trying to, handle someone who's unable to sort of assist with that mobility. Maybe you're transferring them from one place to another, or you're helping them with their exercises, you're providing support for them for their exercises, or during a therapy session, which requires balance on your part, coordination on your part, and a lot of patience kind of on everybody's part, which can sometimes not be as readily available as we would like, which that can all lead to emotional and mental strains, right? So caregiving isn't easy. It can be an on-call 24 hours a day role. And that really leaves little to no time for yourself. So you often grapple with just a whirlwind of emotions that affects your well-being. Commonly, people say is stress, obviously, due to the caregiving emotional and physical strain. All of those responsibilities that we just went through pile up, and it can just feel like there's never enough time, there's never enough energy to get everything done. And so it's no surprise that caregivers are less likely to engage in preventative health behavior than non-caregivers, because you just don't have time to go to the gym. You loved going to your yoga class, and you just can't imagine taking an hour out of your day for yourself. There's no way. Not only don't you have the time for it, but you can't, the thought of having to drive yourself to class, get into the class, do the class, drive yourself home, you're just like, forget it, I'm not going to do that. This prolonged stress can really put caregivers at risk for poor health, and it increases the chances of heart disease, stroke, particularly under those high stress conditions. And so when you find yourself mentally, physically, emotionally exhausted, you're running on empty, and you are drained of energy, drained of enthusiasm. Another common feeling is guilt. Maybe you feel guilty for taking time for yourself. Maybe you do decide to go to that class, and then you get to the class and you feel awful. Like how selfish of you to take that class, take it when your loved one is at home, and you just can't, then you start to beat yourself up for it. or maybe like you're not doing enough. Maybe there's that nagging voice in the back of your head that you should be doing more, you could be doing more. Somebody else wouldn't have to take that yoga class. If they were in your position, they would be fine, like 24 hours a day taking care of this person. Whatever that sort of mental tape is that you're repeating to yourself, whatever that voice is telling you, is sort of just piling on to the grief and the sort of beating up on yourself. When you're already, the truth is you're already going above and beyond for your loved one, which of course you would do. I mean, that's a given, but you also don't have to add to the stress by piling more onto yourself. And lastly, I'll just touch on the financial pressures and time constraints, like I mentioned earlier. Caregiving is an all-encompassing role, and it demands an immense amount of time, which can significantly affect your own work, your own social life, and your own personal time. It can feel like you're walking on a tightrope. You're juggling all these schedules, arranging for coverage. If you have to get at work, if you have to take time off, or maybe you have to reduce your hours altogether, maybe you have to take a leave of absence for a while in order to really be present and take care of your loved one, which can really, affect your financial stability if you're having to, leave work for a period of time and not get paid. Also, it can affect your like work prospects, your career prospects. If you're trying to move forward in your career and you have some aspirations and then you have to take some time off, so that adds a level of stress to what you're already dealing with. Some people are able to hire someone to come in, a live-in, maybe not live-in, but a paid caregiver to come in so that you can continue to work full time. But that's still another added expense, even if you do continue working, that, on top of the mounting medical bills and medication bills that can file up really quicker than you expected. So that might not be feasible for everybody. So it really is a difficult, challenging place to be. And your social life is often impacted. Caregivers, you often start declining invitations, maybe because you don't feel like you should leave. You should be home with your loved one, taking care of them. Maybe, maybe you have friends who haven't gone through something like this, and so they don't understand what you're going through. And so it's not comforting to be with them, even though you'd like to be out and acting normal and everything. It's just it doesn't fill your cup anymore, because you start to feel isolated. And so you start to withdraw. Maybe they keep asking, you keep saying no, they stop asking. So you feel even more isolated. And it's just it's a vicious cycle. And so finding personal time just really becomes a rarity among all of those duties and responsibilities that you have on your plate. And so hobbies that you used to love, self-care routines that you were diligent about, any leisurely moments that you might have had just really get pushed to the back burner, and it can really pile up. So this is where I'm going to introduce compassion fatigue. It is really the combination of emotional and physical exhaustion that affects people who are being exposed to other people's trauma or stressors. So this is sometimes also called secondary traumatic stress. You might have heard vicarious traumatization or burnout. They're sort of used interchangeably. It's really when a caregiver becomes stressed from caring for others. And so you may have heard of like burnout. You might be feeling burnt out. But there is a difference between burnout and compassion fatigue. So I wanted to sort of explain a little bit how these two things differ. Compassion fatigue is really just an extreme state of tension and stress that results in sort of feeling hopeless. You're hopeless, you're helpless, you start to feel indifferent, maybe numb, a little apathetic, pessimistic, just really overall completely kind of disinterested in other people. Like you've just hit your wall. It's a serious problem, compassion fatigue, that can really undermine a person's mental and physical health and negatively affect relationships with others and the ability to care for other people. And this particular phenomenon has really been studied mostly in professional caregivers. So doctors, nurses especially, have a high rate of compassion fatigue. And it's actually the number one reason why people leave the healthcare profession, the medical profession, is because when you're constantly seeing people coming in sick and dying, it can become overwhelming and exhausting and just really undermine your mental health. And so while family caregivers might not be administering that same high level nursing care or medical care, you're still caring for someone in an emotional and physical distress and you have limited options for providing comfort to them. You're helping, you're doing the best you can. And on top of that, it's someone you love. It's not your job, it's someone you love. So you're even more emotionally invested in this person and wanting them to feel better and to not be in distress. And to that point, while there are similarities between professional and familial caregivers, family caregivers don't have some of those safeguards in place that professionally employed caregivers do from their employers, such as mental health days, peer support groups, maybe psychoeducational workshops in their facilities, professional counseling, foregoing breaks and finding respite and meaningful support adds up. And it really affects your overall quality of life. And so you sort of don't have those same safeguards that professional caregivers do. So I quickly wanted to just talk about some of the symptoms and signs of compassion fatigue. Starting with emotional symptoms, easily irritated, just irritable all the time. You might have anxiety, constantly sort of on guard, waiting for the next thing to happen. You're depressed, you just can't get out of that dark place. Maybe you're numb. Maybe you don't have any of that and you just don't feel anything. Maybe you're hopeless. Maybe you're hypervigilant. You're constantly, like I said, with that anxiety, you're constantly on edge, just making sure everything is, like you're on guard all the time, waiting for the next thing to come at you so you can defend it against it. Feeling isolated. Physical symptoms, including sleep issues, fatigue, insomnia, sleep disturbances, weight changes. Maybe you're losing weight because you're not finding time to eat. Maybe you're gaining weight because you're just grabbing the first thing that's handy and it's maybe not the best thing for you. Muscle aches, pains, tension, tightness, gastrointestinal issues, headaches, hypertension. You can get high blood pressure with all the stress and the anxiety if you're constantly on edge. And then some behavioral changes. So withdrawing from those activities that you used to find, joy in, you're just not interested in anymore. Maybe you're feeling you're not as productive as you were, whether that's at work or at school or projects around the house. Like you just kind of let everything go by the wayside. You're not finding any of that sense of accomplishment in anything that you're doing anymore. Maybe you're using some not so great coping skills. Maybe you're turning to alcohol maybe more than you used to, just sort of bring yourself down a level, or maybe, prescription medications or something like that, you're maybe abusing a little bit more than you would have prior to this. Maybe you're feeling sarcastic, maybe you're feeling cynical, maybe, feeling that other people are incompetent, and you're the only one who can do it, which just adds to that sense of responsibility. and pressure on yourself. So again, these are some of the causes and risk factors for compassion fatigue. It's really that prolonged exposure, feeling that you're responsible for helping your loved one who's suffering and in pain for a significant period of time really increases your chances that you're going to experience, that you may experience compassion fatigue. All of those physical demands that we just talked about, that whether it's getting all those errands done, doing all the chauffeuring, making all the food, cleaning the house, that all takes a toll. And then if on top of that, you're not sleeping and you're not eating well, and it's just, you're just like sort of digging a hole and burying yourself a little bit and all of this pressure and stress. And on top of that, you have high levels of empathy, and as I said, you're emotionally invested. This isn't a patient to you. This is your loved one. This is your mom. This is your husband. This is your child. This is someone you love and care for. And compassion is a wonderful gift that we can give to those that we care for and that we love. And so our empathetic response towards our loved one is just how we try to remedy their suffering. We don't ever want to see them suffering or in pain. And so we sort of find ourselves sharing in their own emotional responses to the situation. So maybe they're feeling hopeless and frustrated and scared, and you can't, of course, you're going to take that on and feel that too. It can lead to secondary trauma for you when you're watching someone you love hurt and in pain and feeling, like I said, helpless and frustrated and all of those things. And there's nothing that you can actually do to help. You take that on. So when we're unable to save someone from that distress and their suffering, we sort of turn around and become preoccupied with that pain. And then a lack of support and respite. So respite care really is defined as care provided to a person so that the family caregivers can get a short break from their care responsibilities, so that there's no lapse in care, but that the family can just take maybe some much needed time away to tend to their own needs. And it can be difficult for a primary caregiver to reach out and ask for help, whether that's your own personal background, maybe your culture or your values you don't want outsiders, so to speak, to see your loved one in this condition, or they don't want someone they don't know coming in. So you feel like you can't ask for that help. It can be a challenge. Maybe you feel like you shouldn't have to. Maybe there's that guilt talking in your ear again. We shouldn't need to ask for respite care. This is your mother. And when you were sick, your mother, took care of you. She didn't get a break. So, all of those tapes, I guess, that we play for ourselves can really prevent us from really asking for the help when we need it. And that has an impact. Many caregivers report that caregiving isn't all negative, obviously. It's a rewarding thing that we can do for our loved ones, and that there are positive side effects to caring for someone that you love while they're ill. In your relationship, there's a bonding that happens, and it can really increase your closeness with your loved one, your affection with your loved one, maybe other relationships around you. It can, as you come together, it can really have positive, wonderful effects. It's not all negative. And it can have negative impacts on us mentally, emotionally, socially, as we've talked about. Again, that emotional impact, feeling sadness, hopelessness, helplessness, increased sensitivity to emotional triggers, things that wouldn't necessarily have set you off before. Now it's like, forget it. Decreased sense of accomplishment, like I mentioned, not being as productive as you once were, or finishing the thing and then just being like, okay, that's done. Now we're on to the next thing, and just not taking that moment to feel good about what you've done. Anger. Maybe you're just really angry at God, at the system, whatever it is, at cancer. Yearning for the time before the diagnosis, overwhelmed, feeling self-blame and guilt. There can also be a physical impact. Like we've talked about, chronic fatigue and exhaustion. You're not sleeping, you've got sleep disturbances, you've got insomnia, you can fall asleep, but you can't stay asleep. You have crazy dreams while you're sleeping, so you're not feeling rested when you wake up. Because of all that, you start to become more susceptible to catching illnesses, those colds that the kids come home with, or any physical ailments. Maybe you're tired, so you're not lifting with your legs. And so you bend with your back and you strain your back. And it's a vicious cycle. You have difficulty concentrating, you're forgetful sometimes, you have brain fog, you can't focus, which all then leads you to maybe be a little clumsier than you normally would be, just because you're so tapped out mentally that it's affecting you physically. And then again, the social and relationship impact. Caring for someone with cancer and any terminal illness really can strain relationships with other family and friends. Maybe you feel like your sister should be helping more, or you thought that your cousins would come over more and they're not, and it's like it feels like the burden is all on you and nobody is stepping in to help. Or you're getting invited to those social, it's Friday, maybe people are going to happy hour and you're getting invited to happy hour and you don't want you to go, you can't go, you have nobody, there's no one else, it's you, so you have to say no. And so you start to feel isolated and you start to withdraw and your friends stop asking you, and it's just this vicious cycle that happens. You start to lose interest in things that once mattered to you. Maybe you played on a soccer team on Saturday mornings and you're not doing that now, and you could care less about it. Caregiving can be a choice for some people. Maybe they're able to step in and care for their loved one. And for others, it might become a necessity due to certain circumstances. So, for example, spouses who, you were once equal partners, you did your thing, you raised your kids, you built your house, equal partners putting this life together. Now, maybe one of you is dependent on the other for care, for all of the things we've just talked about previously, that you never expected. That changes the dynamic. Or maybe, in my case, my parents, I was an adult child who my parent used to take care of all my needs. And then the tables turned and I had to take care of her just as she took care of me. And I wasn't prepared for that. And it changed our relationship. It changed our family dynamics. And caregiving takes a priority. So it really shifts all of those other family duties. Maybe older children have to step up and raise younger children while you're caring for your spouse, or, it just really, everything shifts. It's not just one aspect of your life that is affected when you're caring for someone. And so really, now I want to just kind of talk about how to recognize early when you might be heading down this path, because the sooner you notice signs of compassion fatigue, the sooner you can start to sort of care for yourself and replenish those stores of compassion and empathy. So we want to be on the lookout for that physical, psychological, emotional exhaustion, those hopeless, helpless, powerless feelings, that easy irritability, that anger, that deep, dark sadness, the numbness, not feeling anything, being detached from activities, from people, from situations, decreased pleasure in those same activities that once filled your cup, blaming yourself, and maybe having thoughts of not having done enough to help your loved one. You should be doing more. You could be doing more. Decreased sense of your personal and professional accomplishments. Changing maybe a change in your worldview or spirituality. That could be a sign that you need a break. And then those physical symptoms, again, the appetite, losing your appetite, sleep disturbances, all of those things. And so I like to bring this up here because I think it's something that we don't use in this context maybe, but it's exactly the same thing, is that when we're on an airplane and they're doing their safety instructions, the first things they tell us is that you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help your children or people around you with theirs. So really, that's the same thing here. We have to make sure that we're tending to our own emotional and physical well-being while we're providing care for other people, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And so if you begin to notice any of these signs, the next step really is to make yourself a priority and start tending to, at the very least, some of your needs. Maybe you don't book that trip to Tahiti right away, but maybe you do take that 1-hour yoga class on Wednesdays. And I do want to say that compassion fatigue is not black and white. It's a continuum, and every person has different limits. And there are times throughout the caregiver journey where your susceptibility to stress will increase or decrease. You might experience all of these, some of the time, or from time to time. So really, I want to caution you that it's really when this list in front of you becomes more of a description of daily life than a fleeting, a bad day, maybe fleeting behaviors on a bad day or a bad week. But when it's really like, this is your day-to-day life, then it's absolutely time to act. And so I want to just touch on what self-care is. What does that really actually mean? It's essential when caring for someone that you love who's been diagnosed with cancer. And it's all of these things: finding a balance between a professional and personal life, taking time off if you can, when you can, following those self-care routines, trying to get enough sleep, if that means at least going to bed at the same time, or choosing healthy foods, trying to get regular exercise, get outside in nature. Try to say yes once in a while to maybe a lunch date or something as you can. Identifying what is a priority for you and trying to re-engage in those activities that fill your cup again, that really bring you that little bit of spark. Trying to practice gratitude and being in the present moment, not getting too far ahead of the situation and not dwelling on the past, but really just staying in this present moment and facing what's in front of you, can help your mental and emotional well-being. Focusing on things that you do have control over instead of the things that you don't, including thoughts and feelings as best you can, rather than having maybe some unrealistic expectations about changing things that are just beyond your control, and really asking for help when you need it. I think that's a really hard one for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. So, I just want to say that while many caregivers feel that self-care is sort of impossible, like, when am I going to fit this in? And all of that, Megan, that whole list you gave me earlier, how am I going to fit this in? I just want to say that, if you don't allocate some time for yourself, no one else will do it for you. And so you have to, it's just as important to care for yourself while you're caring for someone else. You will be a better caregiver if you have cared for yourself and you have nurtured your being while you're caring for them. And so I like to introduce resilience right now. And I bring it up because resilience, I think 20 plus years ago, used to be thought of as like either a trait you had or you didn't. You were either a resilient person who could bounce back or you were not. And now the research is showing that, well, actually, that's not true. Resilience is a skill. It's really something that everyone can develop within themselves. It's a quality that we can foster in ourselves that help carry us through. And so I just want to touch on some of these 4 defining attributes of resilience. Rebounding, which is that ability to bounce back after facing, a life-altering event like a diagnosis of cancer. Determination, whether you have a firm or a fixed intention on achieving a desired effect, desired end. Self-efficacy, the belief that you have the ability to achieve this goal. You believe you can do this. You believe you can overcome XYZ. And social support. No one is an island. And as humans, we are communal by nature. We need the tribe. And that's what's so great about the cancer support community is like that this can be your tribe. This can be the people you surround yourself with for social support. In my own practice, I do caregiver support groups, and I like to teach them some techniques, I guess, for self-care that you can use anywhere, so that to help sort of foster this resilience that you can use throughout your day or these tough times. And so I just wanted to share 2 of the techniques with you. I know we're running out of time, so I'll do my best to get us there. So the first one is one of my favorites. It's one of the easiest, and you can do it anywhere, anytime, no matter where you are. If you're driving, if you're in a doctor's appointment, wherever you are, in a movie, whatever. It's called box breathing or square breathing. And it's just, it's a way to sort of bring yourself back to your breath. I think in times of stress, we either hold our breath, which is something that I do. I hold my breath when I'm stressed out, or you breathe shallowly. And so this technique is really just designed to sort of bring you back to your body and the present moment. Again, I think we can, if we're in the present moment, that's a better place to sort of work from. So super simple technique. You just breathe in for 4 seconds. You hold your breath for 4 seconds. You exhale for 4 seconds. And then you hold the breath out for 4 seconds. And it regulating our breath in that way, sort of, it lowers levels of the stress hormone cortisol, which is great. It sort of interrupts, I guess, maybe that fight or flight response, activating that parasympathetic nervous system for us, which helps us kind of get back to our equilibrium. And it just is calming. It calms the mind to just stop for a minute and just focus and count and breathe, and then focus and count and breathe. And so it's just a really nice technique when you're starting to get overwhelmed. And again, that you can really do anywhere. And then this is another one that I teach a lot. It's another mindfulness activity. It's called loving kindness. And it's another way to sort of just pause and create a little space between yourself and that whirlwind of emotion, the overwhelm, the nagging voices in your head, the to-do list that's in front of you, the million things that you have to do, and you're shaking because you're getting so flustered. It's just a way to be like, to just stop for a moment and take a minute for thinking like a loving thought for your spouse, just finding acceptance for where you are. Again, going back to those things we can control and the things we can't. That list still does have to get done, and all these things still need to happen, but you can take a minute, 20 seconds to just stop and pause. And it's really about finding a mantra or an affirmation, something that you can say that resonates for you, that sort of just can bring you back to the present moment and sort of calm you down. And so, and then you can just repeat it to yourself, whether that's in your head, if you need to go to the bathroom and say it out loud, whatever that looks like for you. But and just a few here that I offer, but I invite you to find something for yourself that makes sense and resonates for you. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. May I have the courage to move forward. That last one speaks to me a lot, especially when I was caring for my mom. May I have the courage to move forward into the unknown, like that. It was just, it's just a nice way to sort of be like, okay, I see where you are, I see you, and we're gonna acknowledge that, and we're gonna move forward. And so this is not intended at all to diminish or take away from what you're experiencing at all. Everything you're feeling is valid and true, and it has its place. And so this is really about, it's really designed to help you just acknowledge that you are in distress, that you are in pain, that you do have a lot on your plate, and it is overwhelming. And taking this breath, taking a moment to say a kind thought to yourself is just a way to help you move forward. Because that's all we have to do is just move forward. So I won't, like I said, we're almost at the end, so I won't take too long with this, but I really encourage you to build that support system. You are not alone in caring for someone, whether you have the cancer, whether you are diagnosed with cancer, whether you're caring for someone who has cancer, you're not alone in this process. And so reach out to the cancer support community. You find your friends, your family, the people that you trust with this work, find that emotional support, find practical assistance, somebody who can maybe run to the grocery store for you, or help you with a daily chore, helping you find resources, someone to help with your mental health who can just be like encouraging. Sometimes you just need like an encouraging word, and that makes all the difference. Physical help, maybe someone who can, if there's an emergency, they know the correct procedure for your loved one, so that if you do ask for help and you do take an hour away, that person can come in, and you have faith that if anything should happen, your loved one's cared for. Like, what a relief that would be. So you could really go and be present in that activity that you're doing for yourself. Find that social interaction. Say yes sometimes to those, even if it's showing up for 30 minutes and leaving, but giving yourself permission to be social and to participate in a way that feels okay for you. You don't have to stay the whole time, you can leave. Finding resources, finding, information, advocacy, financial assistance, whatever that looks like for you. Get the cancer support community, again, is a great place to help with that. Again, the encouragement, motivation. And again, if you are caring for yourself, you can really provide higher quality care to your loved one than if you're really running on empty. So it's really important that you take this to heart, and you do build that support system so you can care for everybody in the picture, including yourself. So key takeaways, we talked about what family caregivers are, what that looks like, the many challenges that are facing you as a caregiver. Talked a little bit about compassion fatigue, what to look for compassion fatigue, what are the risk factors for that, the impact that it can have on you and your loved one, and the care you're providing for your loved one. So really recognizing those early warning signs and trying to manage your stress, manage that overwhelm and your emotions and your feelings, and trying to prevent that compassion fatigue before it becomes a problem. And so I always end my groups and my workshops with a quote. I think it's just a nice way to sort of tie up our time together. And this is one of my all-time favorites. It's from Mr. Rogers. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we're not alone. And so I want you to know you're not alone. The cancer support community is here. I'm here. The next slide. If you ever wanted to reach out, if you wanted more information, please feel free. If you have questions about anything that I've talked about, please feel free. And I just wanted to thank you for spending this hour with me. And I hope that I was able to shed some light on how important your work is and how important you are and how much your loved one needs you to care for yourself while you're caring for them as well. So
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Meg.
You're welcome.
Can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise, sharing the meaningful story of your life with us, and really guiding us through the challenges that we face as caregivers, and then providing some ways to cope. If you have questions, we won't really have time for those today, but if you have questions, you can reach out to us at info@cancersupportla.org. And we can also share Meg's information if you didn't catch it on her last slide as well. And you're more than welcome to reach out to her. You can visit our website at cancersupportla.org. Meg mentioned many of the resources that we have there, and you can take a look at our website as well. And then I wanted to highlight our caregiver support groups. We do have support groups specifically designed for caregivers. So please reach out to us if that is something you feel that you need or are interested in. You can get started by scanning that QR code, or you can email us at info@cancersupportla.org. Thank you for your attentiveness today. And again, thank you, Meg, for the generosity of your time today and your expertise. And we hope to see all of you at another webinar in the future. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.